Yes, I've been involved with CANS for really quite a long time. When I worked at MSN some years back, we first started sponsoring the event because we kind of convinced the media industry, the buying side of the industry, that actually digital was a good idea. But the creative industry was in a different place, and you know, you'd end up in situations where the space would be booked and there'd be no creative. You know, you go back way back then, that's sort of like the early 2000s. You'd have a situation where you're more or less photocopying some print advert to get something up on the web. Yeah? And so to engage and talk about the power of digital and the value of digital and how best to use digital was something we got involved with a long time ago. But these days, what you say is really interesting because technology is now playing a much greater part, and the creative possibilities of technology are getting better and better and better. There are all kinds of things going on. The proliferation of devices means that new technical formats, HTML5, are necessary and need to be embedded into the industry so that you can actually do what you need to talk to the audience regardless of which particular device people are looking at. And we've done a whole lot of research, very interesting, which I hope we have time for on that. But also the convergence of video across platforms. There's a whole lot of technical companies coming down to Cannes, getting involved with the advertising agencies in a way that they hadn't done before. And Cannes itself is just a great, it's kind of the place to gather people's communication together. And very often agencies use it as an opportunity to bring all their regional office together and have their own internal meetings. And so it's a great opportunity to interact. That technological convergence started off as being around programmatic, I'd say. But in fact, I think that's moving forward quite a piece. I mean, we're sitting here in the offices of Videology. Yeah. They're interested in the convergence between television and digital at a video level. And I think that's part of where we're going with all this. There's a lot of progress to be made in making things more efficient, making it more profitable for all the parties in the chain. And there's also a lot of creativity. So it's never really been a more exciting time at Cannes. So, the BBC. Yeah. The BBC piece, well, we're a supporter of the Young Media Lions Academy there, so that's an event which is basically a training course for a week. Gives the opportunity for up-and-coming young media professionals to be sponsored, to come down and go on a course. And many of the most senior people who come to Cannes love actually doing seminars and training for that event. And it's a great opportunity for people to get a flavour of the industry and to learn a lot off some of the really heavyweights that are down there on doing the main presentations in the Palais and what have you. Now, we've been supporting that for a year or two, and that is actually part of our strategy. We're also down there to speak on content, on branded content. We have been asked to go and put a presentation which we did originally in Dubai actually, to run that again while we're down there. And we're also down there to talk about our new affluent consumer research, which talks about how the highest income segments from right around the world, how they're now engaging with devices and how that is actually changing the way in which marketeers might approach that audience. So this is actually really interesting, the affluent consumer research. So this is the top 20%, the top percent of by income across 6 different markets. So the actual income varies, but this is markets from right around the world, European ones, some Asian ones, America, and so on. And so what you find with that is that increasing proportions, and you'll have to come and see the research to see all the exact numbers. We already know that people pick their phones up and look at them every hour. What you're not so sure about, if you think about the affluent income groups, they're actually senior executives, they're busy people, they're really time poor people. So do they look at their mobile phones all the time? And the answer is yes. Do 50% of the people that are using their phones more than once an hour are actually using them for business activities? And business, I mean diary planning, I mean email, I mean looking at BBC News, which is more of a business activity than it is anything else. Yeah. And a great proportion of those users are actually very convinced by using apps. And the reason for that appears to be that apps are very efficient. It's far more efficient to have that information, and news information, for instance, or sport information curated for you. So you look at that app and then you shut it down and you go back to what you're doing. What we also find, because the research as well as being across 6 markets, 6,000 people, that part of the study, not an insignificant thing. We teamed up with another research company who actually looked at their cross-media studies across 400,000 users and went back through several hundred advertising studies to see which of the devices turned out to be more useful. And if you look at brand attributes, you'll find that amongst the affluent consumer group, the mobile device turns out to be the device which was strongest at changing positions of brand favourability or brand intent or something, which is an absolutely fascinating result. And more detailed than that, if you had an absolutely brand new mobile device, you were twice as likely to be impacted as you were if you just had an ordinary smartphone. If you have a brand new smartphone, you're far more likely to be streaming video, to be engaging at a much deeper level. And so what the data is really telling us here is if you're after affluent consumers, a lot of these people have already moved across to smartphones. So that's not just, so mobile phones is just not a thing for kids. In fact, it might be the most effective way of reaching the elusive affluent consumer. There are lots of different people trying different ideas, yeah. But the bottom line is, influencing people is about whether or not you've got their attention. Yeah. So whether the ad format is one way or another is slightly different from, is the consumer regarding this as their primary business device, and an increasing proportion of the affluent consumer are actually regarding the mobile phone as their primary device. So that means you have a better chance of reaching them. So whether you do that using a full page interstitial or using a 300 by 250, which some people call MPUs, which is the same format that you might run on the open website, which we're making sure runs across the whole of our service, or whether you do that with video, the first port of call is that, is the audience actually looking at it? And I think our research is demonstrating, tick, they definitely are. The second point is that given the screen size, if you're running a 300 by 250 pixel advertisement, it's taking up most of the screen if the person's got an iPhone or a Samsung phone or something of that order. And so actually, compared to the proportion of the page that's available, then actually it's almost the same as buying a full page advertisement on a website. And so that's a really important thing. And then the other thing is that there are no other ads on that screen at that time. And so that all of those are really interesting things from the point of view of attention. So I think that the argument shouldn't be about which is the most important format, because I think that debate will never finish. But the argument is, do you have the consumer's attention? To which the answer is a resounding yes. And then the issue is, can you actually target the way you want to? Can you report on it? And indeed, if you are a marketeer, are you in fact providing a good experience the whole way through, which is the same challenge marketeers have always had regardless of whichever medium they used. Yeah. If you have people walking into a shop, you've got to be able to find the products which are advertised on the television or on the billboard. And it's the same thing with mobile. And it's a surprising number of enormous corporations are still not really geared up to handle advertising and marketing requests that come through those platforms. We would argue that you better hurry up, because the consumers have certainly got their attention. And the last question we asked in our research was, what do the affluent consumers think of brands that appear in the mobile space? And the feedback was they saw them as forward-looking and up-to-date brands. And there might be a correlation there at a sort of not necessarily totally conscious level, but oh look, these guys are smart enough to be advertising to me. Yeah? And that, I think, is really interesting feedback. And I'm sure that'll capture the interest of a few marketeers down in Cannes.